My name is Emily Dawson, I'm 22 years old, and just a few months ago I graduated from the University of Illinois with a degree in sociology. Everyone told me that graduation would be one of the best days of my life, the kind of day you tuck away in your memory like a keepsake, something to revisit when life gets hard. But for me, it turned out to be the beginning of something I still struggle to fully understand. To give you some context, I grew up in Springfield with my parents and my older brother, Matthew. He's 2 years older than me, and our relationship has always been complicated, to put it mildly. We weren't the kind of siblings who teased and then made up later, we carried grudges like trophies. If I got a good grade, he'd find a way to downplay it. If I made new friends, he'd mock me until I felt stupid. And yet, no matter how much I despised his attitude, I always seemed to be the one held to higher standards. My dad played a big role in that imbalance. He's not the kind of father people would call abusive at first glance. He's charming, polite, the kind of man who can win over a room. But behind closed doors, there was something unsettling about him. He never shouted, never hit, but his control ran deep in quieter, more unnerving ways. He could make me feel small without saying a word. My mom? She kept the peace, always smoothing things over, but I knew she carried her own quiet fears when it came to him. So when graduation rolled around, I had a bad feeling even before the ceremony began. I smiled for pictures, shook hands with professors, and tried to focus on the pride I felt in my achievement. But the celebration afterward, what was supposed to be a joyful moment for my family, was the stage where everything changed. The celebration was held in our backyard. My mom had gone all out with the decorations, white streamers, blue balloons, and a table loaded with catered food. A long line of relatives and family friends had shown up, some I hadn't seen in years. It should have felt warm, like a moment where everyone was gathered to celebrate me, but instead I felt like I was being watched the entire time. My dad kept close, shaking hands with guests, laughing when appropriate, but every so often, his eyes would flick toward me in a way that made my stomach knot. It wasn't the proud gaze of a father, it was something sharper, like he was waiting for me to slip up. Matthew, of course, played his role as the golden son. He wasn't the one graduating, but he managed to stand at the center of every conversation, telling stories about his job and bragging about his plans for the future. People laughed at his jokes, nodded at his opinions, and barely asked me a single question about my degree. I stood there with a fixed smile, my champagne glass in hand, reminding myself over and over that the day was supposed to be about me, not him. That's when I noticed it. It happened quickly, but not quickly enough for me to miss it. My father stood near the drinks table, his back half turned to the crowd. I watched as he glanced over his shoulder, then reached into his jacket pocket. His hand moved carefully, deliberately, as he sprinkled a fine white powder into the glass I had set down earlier. He swirled it lightly, like someone absent-mindedly stirring sugar into coffee, then turned back to the party with a smile that didn't touch his eyes. For a moment, I froze. My heart slammed against my ribs, but my face remained calm. I couldn't let him see that I had noticed. Instead, I walked toward the table, my heels clicking against the patio, and forced myself to look casual. When I reached for the glass, my dad gave me a nod, subtle, approving, like he was proud I was about to drink. I lifted it slowly, but instead of bringing it to my lips, I turned toward Matthew. "Hey, this one's for you," I said smoothly, handing him the glass. He smirked, took it without hesitation, and raised it in a mock toast before downing half of it in one gulp. I stood there, smiling, pretending everything was normal. But inside, I was screaming. At first, nothing happened. Matthew lowered the glass, smacked his lips, and gave me that smug grin he always did when he thought he'd gotten the better of me. He probably assumed I was just being nice for once, maybe even making some kind of peace offering on my big day. The irony of it nearly made me laugh, but the weight in my chest was too heavy for humor. I could feel my dad's eyes on me, watching carefully, almost studying me. I didn't dare look directly at him, but I could sense it, like he was waiting for my reaction, expecting me to falter. I tightened my grip around my empty plate and forced a small, controlled smile. If he suspected that I knew, things could turn dangerous fast. Matthew went on talking, laughing, holding court with a group of cousins and a couple of his friends who had tagged along. For a few minutes, everything appeared normal. But then, I noticed a subtle shift. His words began to slur ever so slightly. Nothing obvious at first, but I knew my brother well enough to catch the difference. He rubbed at his temple, then set the champagne glass down on the table a little harder than he probably meant to. A faint flush crept up his neck, and his posture, normally so confident, so puffed up, started to sag. "Matt, you okay?" one of his friends asked, half laughing, thinking he was just tipsy. "I'm fine," he snapped, his tone sharper than usual. But his voice cracked, and his eyes blinked rapidly like he was struggling to focus. My stomach churned. I didn't know what my father had slipped into the drink, but it was working. And it wasn't alcohol, it was something stronger, something dangerous. For a split second, I considered blurting out the truth, telling everyone what I had seen. But the image of my father standing there, calm and controlled, with that faint smirk on his lips, it stopped me. If I exposed him in front of all these people, I didn't know what he would do. Worse, I didn't know if anyone would even believe me. My dad had always been the respectable one, the charming host. I'd be painted as the overdramatic daughter with a grudge. So instead, I swallowed hard and stayed quiet, pretending to laugh at a joke someone nearby told. All the while, my brother swayed slightly on his feet, confusion and irritation flashing across his face. Inside, I was already planning my next move. Within 10 minutes, Matthew was no longer the center of attention for his stories or his charm. He was the center of attention because something was visibly wrong. He tried to keep up his usual act, laughing too loudly at a joke, leaning on the patio table like it was all part of his performance. But I could see the panic creeping in behind his eyes. His movements grew jerky, uncoordinated. When he reached for his drink again, his hands shook just enough for the glass to clink hard against the table. A couple of our cousins exchanged uneasy glances. "Matt, seriously, what's going on with you?" one of them asked. I said I'm fine, he barked, his voice louder than necessary. His words tumbled out in a rush, and he stumbled back a step, bumping into a chair. People started whispering. My mom was across the yard, mid-conversation with an aunt, but she turned as soon as she heard the commotion. I saw the concern flash across her face, the way her smile dropped as she excused herself and hurried over. My dad, however, didn't move. He stood near the grill, calmly sipping his own drink, his expression carefully blank. That was how I knew. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't worried. He was waiting. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wanted to scream, to grab Matthew and drag him away before things got worse, but my body felt frozen in place. This wasn't supposed to happen, whatever my father had planned, it wasn't supposed to happen to Matthew. And yet here we were, everyone staring as my brother's voice cracked and his knees buckled. "Matthew," my mom cried out, reaching for him as he stumbled again. He shoved her off, angry and embarrassed, but his strength wasn't there. His face was pale now, sweat beading at his temples. He looked around like he couldn't recognize where he was, like the backyard had become a maze. The murmurs grew louder. Guests were pulling out their phones, some debating whether to call an ambulance, others whispering that he'd clearly had too much to drink. That explanation was easier, safer, than the truth. I forced myself to glance at my dad. His lips were curved ever so slightly, just at the edges, in a way no one else would notice. A smile. And in that moment, it hit me, he didn't care who went down. My mom crouched beside Matthew as he slumped into a patio chair, her hands fluttering uselessly at his shoulders. She kept asking him what was wrong, but he could barely get words out. His breathing was shallow, uneven, and every time he tried to speak, his voice broke. "Maybe he's just dehydrated," one of our cousins suggested nervously. "It's hot out. Someone get him some water." "I'll grab it," I said quickly, but my voice came out shaky. I moved toward the kitchen just to get away, just to collect myself before I lost control in front of everyone. As I passed by my dad, I caught the faintest glimmer in his eyes. He didn't look at Matthew. He looked at me. It was like he was telling me without words, "This was supposed to be you." My hands shook as I filled a glass with cold water inside the kitchen. My thoughts raced, colliding into one another. If I said something now, would anyone believe me? Or would they brush it off, chalk it up to stress, nerves, or my issues with my dad? For years, I'd been branded as the sensitive one, the emotional daughter. That label could protect him more than anything else. When I came back outside, Matthew was worse. His head lolled against the chair, his lips pale. Mom was on the verge of tears as she dabbed at his forehead with a napkin. "I think we should call 911, she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, do it," I urged, forcing myself to stay calm. But my dad stepped forward for the first time, his voice firm, steady, commanding. "He's fine. He probably mixed drinks earlier and didn't eat enough. Let him rest." The way he said it made people hesitate. That was his power, his ability to sound so certain, so rational, that others doubted their own instincts. A few of the guests nodded, murmuring in agreement, as if they'd just been reassured. "No, he's not fine," I snapped before I could stop myself. My voice cracked, too loud, drawing every eye. "Something's wrong with him. He didn't just drink too much." The air went silent. My mom looked up at me, startled, searching my face for an explanation. My dad, though, his gaze darkened, and for a moment, I swore the whole party disappeared. It was just me and him, locked in that stare, and I realized something chilling. By trying to protect Matthew, I had just put myself back on his list. All eyes were on me. My words hung heavy in the air, the kind of silence that makes every second feel stretched out and sharp. I could feel my pulse in my throat, my ears, everywhere. My mom's hand froze where it rested on Matthew's shoulder, her eyes flicking from me to my dad as if she were caught between two different realities. My father's expression didn't change much, but I caught it, the tightening at his jaw, the faint narrowing of his eyes. A warning. He was calculating how far I might go, and how much everyone else might listen. "Emily," he said evenly, his voice low but carrying through the yard. "That's enough. You're making a scene." "I don't care," I shot back, surprising even myself with the edge in my tone. "He needs help. Now." Some of the guests shifted uncomfortably, whispering to each other. I could almost hear their thoughts. "She's overreacting again. She's dramatic." But then Matthew groaned, a deep guttural sound that silenced them. His body jerked forward like a wave of nausea had hit him hard. His skin was clammy, and when he tried to stand, his legs buckled. My mom barely managed to keep him from hitting the ground. That was it. A cousin fumbled for their phone. "I'm calling an ambulance," they said, and this time no one argued. I exhaled shakily, part relief, part dread. But when I looked up, my dad wasn't relieved. He was furious, though he hid it well from everyone else. To them, he looked concerned, hovering just enough to play the role of the worried father. But I saw it for what it was, rage simmering beneath the mask, directed at me. As sirens echoed faintly in the distance, I realized two things at once. First, Matthew might actually die. And second, my father now knew without a doubt, I had seen everything. The flashing red and blue lights spilled across our backyard like a warning. Guests shuffled aside to make room as the paramedics rushed in, their calm urgency slicing through the panic. My mom waved them over frantically, explaining what had happened in a rush of half-sentences. Matthew was barely conscious now, slumped in the chair, his breaths shallow and uneven. One of the medics knelt by his side, shining a small light into his eyes. The other asked quick questions, jotting notes down. "Any history of seizures? Allergic reactions? Drugs or alcohol?" I opened my mouth to answer, but my father beat me to it. His voice was firm, authoritative, the kind that made people listen without thinking. "He's had a few drinks. Nothing more." He's under a lot of stress lately, long work hours. This isn't unusual. I clenched my fists. Lies, smooth and practiced, slipping from his tongue like he'd rehearsed them. Sir, we'll run tests once we get him to the hospital, one of the medics said curtly, clearly uninterested in speculation. They lifted Matthew onto a stretcher, strapping him down carefully. My mom followed close, wringing her hands, her face pale with fear. Emily, she called, her voice trembling. Come with me. I wanted to. Every part of me wanted to be there for her, for Matthew, even after everything between us. But when I glanced toward my dad, I froze. He was standing off to the side, arms folded, watching me with that unreadable expression. Not anger, not fear, control. The kind of look that reminded me of every quiet, suffocating moment growing up under his roof. If I went with them, I'd have distance. Safety. But if I left now, I'd be giving him space to twist the story, to cover his tracks, to make sure by the time I came back, no one would believe a word I said. So I stayed rooted to the ground, forcing a small nod to my mom. Go. I'll meet you there, I said, even though my chest felt like it was caving in. As the ambulance doors closed and the sirens wailed off into the night, the guests slowly began to scatter, murmuring excuses about work in the morning, about letting the family have privacy. Within half an hour, the yard was nearly empty, littered with plates and deflated balloons. And then it was just me and him. My father stepped closer, his shoes crunching against the gravel. His voice was soft, too soft. You should have drunk that glass, Emily. The backyard was silent now, except for the faint hum of insects and the rustle of the breeze. The laughter, the chatter, the clinking of glasses, it was all gone. What lingered instead was the weight of his words. You should have drunk that glass, Emily. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I stood frozen, gripping the edge of the table as if it were the only thing keeping me upright. My father's tone hadn't been threatening, not in the way people think of threats. It was calm, steady, almost conversational. That was what made it worse. You think I didn't see? I whispered, finally forcing myself to look at him. His lips curved just slightly, not a smile, not quite. You see a lot of things that aren't there. Always have. Gaslighting. Classic. I clenched my teeth so hard my jaw ached. I saw you put something in my drink, I said, louder this time, though my voice shook. Don't lie to me. He stepped closer, closing the space between us. He didn't raise his voice, didn't show anger. That wasn't his way. Instead, he leaned down, his eyes level with mine, his breath calm and measured. If you tell anyone that, Emily, they won't believe you. They never have they? His words were quiet but sharp, each one cutting into me. You've always been the dramatic one. The emotional one. The one who makes things up. My throat burned, not from tears, but from the helpless rage pressing against me. Because he was right, at least partly. I'd spent years being dismissed, my concerns brushed off as overreactions. He'd crafted that image of me so carefully, and now it was his shield. You tried to kill me, I said, my voice breaking. He tilted his head, studying me like I was some fascinating problem. Or maybe your brother just had too much to drink. Maybe you imagined the rest. The worst part was, he sounded believable. If anyone else had been standing there, they might have nodded along. I swallowed hard, my hands trembling at my sides. I won't let you get away with this. For the first time that night, his mask slipped. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed, and there it was, the flash of cold fury he usually kept so well hidden. You already have, he said simply. Then he turned and walked back into the house, leaving me standing in the darkness, my body shaking, my mind screaming. By the time I got to the hospital, the sterile smell of antiseptic hit me like a wall. The waiting room was buzzing with quiet voices, the kind of atmosphere where everyone sat perched on the edge of their seats, hoping for news but dreading it at the same time. My mom was sitting near the vending machines, her hands clenched around a styrofoam cup of coffee she hadn't touched. When she saw me, she stood quickly, relief and exhaustion mixing in her expression. "Emily." She wrapped her arms around me, tighter than she had in years. For a moment, I let myself sink into her embrace, but the weight of what had happened pulled me back too quickly. "How is he?" I asked, my voice low. "They're running tests," she said, shaking her head. "They think it could have been something he ingested. They're not sure yet. He was barely coherent when they brought him in." Her voice cracked, and she covered her mouth with one trembling hand. My chest tightened. "Mom, listen to me." I hesitated, my throat tightening. Saying it out loud felt dangerous, but silence felt worse. "Dad put something in my drink tonight. I saw him. Matt drank it instead." Her eyes widened, then darted away, scanning the room as if afraid someone else might have heard. "Emily, don't." Her voice was sharp, almost desperate. "You don't know what you saw." "I do know," I insisted, my voice rising before I forced it back down. "I saw it with my own eyes." She shook her head, tears brimming. "You don't understand what you're saying. Do you know what accusing him of something like that would do?" "Yes," I said, steady now. "I know exactly what it would do. But it's the truth." Her hand trembled as she set down the untouched coffee. She didn't meet my gaze. "Emily, please. Just, not here. Not now." Before I could argue further, a doctor approached. "Family of Matthew Dawson?" My mom straightened immediately, her entire body tense. I swallowed hard, my pulse racing as the doctor continued. "He's stable for now," he said. "But we found traces of a substance in his system. Something that shouldn't be there." My mom's eyes widened. Mine locked onto the doctor's. For the first time, I wasn't the only one who knew. The words hung in the air like a heavy weight, something that shouldn't be there. My mom blinked rapidly, her hand tightening on the edge of the chair as if she needed to physically ground herself. "What kind of substance?" she asked, her voice brittle. The doctor shifted, glancing between us. "We're still running a full tox screen, but preliminary results suggest it was a sedative. Not something we'd expect him to have taken voluntarily." His tone was clinical, careful, but there was an edge there too, a quiet suggestion that this wasn't an accident. I felt a chill rush through me. Sedative. It confirmed everything I had seen. Could someone have slipped it to him? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's possible," the doctor said. "We'll know more once the tests come back, but given the dosage, I'd say it wasn't recreational. He's lucky he didn't lose consciousness entirely before arriving here." My mom's face had gone pale. She nodded quickly, murmuring something like, "Thank you," before the doctor excused himself. As soon as he was out of earshot, she turned to me, her voice low and sharp. "Don't you dare say a word to anyone about what you think you saw." I stared at her, my chest tightening. "Mom, he just confirmed it. Something was in his system. You think that's a coincidence?" Her lips trembled, but her eyes hardened. "Emily, please. You'll destroy this family if you start pointing fingers. Do you understand me? Destroy it." "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "Dad will. He already has." Tears slipped down her cheeks, and for a second, she looked less like my mother and more like a woman trapped, cornered by her own fear. She opened her mouth, closed it, then finally muttered, "You don't know what he's capable of." "I know enough," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. We sat there in silence, the hum of the hospital machines filling the air. And then I realized something that made my skin crawl. She wasn't just afraid of me being wrong. She was afraid I was right. It was close to midnight when the doors to the waiting room slid open, and my father walked in. He didn't rush. He never rushed. His steps were deliberate, steady, like a man who owned the ground beneath him. My mom stood instantly, wiping her face with the back of her hand as if she hadn't just been crying. You're here, she said, her voice thin. Of course I'm here, he replied smoothly, setting a hand on her shoulder. To anyone else, he looked like the picture of a concerned husband and father. But when his eyes shifted to me, the warmth evaporated. How is he? He asked, keeping his tone carefully measured. Stable, Mom said quickly. They're still running tests. He nodded, his gaze lingering on her just long enough to remind her of something unspoken before turning back to me. You've been quiet. I clenched my jaw. What do you want me to say? That depends, he said lightly, almost as if we were talking about the weather. On whether you've been telling stories again. My chest tightened. I wanted to scream, to drag the doctor back here and force him to repeat every word about the sedative in front of my father. But the look in my mom's eyes stopped me, wide, pleading, begging me not to. You should focus on Matthew, I said finally, my voice flat. For a long moment, he just studied me, his expression unreadable. Then he gave a small smile. You're right. Matthew needs us. He walked past me toward the hallway where the patient rooms were, his hand brushing my shoulder as he passed. The touch was light, almost affectionate, but it made my entire body flinch. It wasn't a gesture of comfort. It was a reminder, of control, of power, of how easily he could break me if I pushed too far. When he disappeared down the hall, my mom sank back into her chair, trembling. You don't understand, Emily, she whispered. He doesn't lose. Not ever. I stared at the hallway, my pulse hammering. Maybe she was right. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure I cared. Because if I didn't do something, my brother wouldn't be the last person he tried to destroy. The hallway leading to the patient rooms felt too quiet, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead. I followed at a distance, my steps careful, my heart hammering in my chest. I wasn't even sure why, whether it was to protect Matthew, or to finally see my father without the mask he wore in public. Through the narrow window in the door, I saw Matthew lying in the hospital bed, pale and groggy, wires and monitors surrounding him. His eyes fluttered open when my father walked in, though he looked too weak to sit up. Dad, he croaked, his voice rough. My father pulled a chair close to the bed, leaning forward, his expression soft and fatherly, the kind of expression I hadn't seen directed at me in years. You scared us tonight, son, he said gently. But you'll be all right. Matthew gave a weak laugh, though it turned into a cough. Don't know what happened. Just remember drinking, then, nothing. My father nodded, brushing his hand across the blanket like he was tucking him in. You pushed yourself too hard, that's all. Long hours. Stress. You've got to take better care of yourself. I felt my nails dig into my palms as I watched. He was rewriting the story right there, planting seeds in Matthew's mind before he even had the strength to question it. Matthew frowned, his eyelids heavy. Felt weird. Different. My father's smile didn't falter. That's what happens when your body gives out on you. Rest now. I couldn't take it anymore. I pushed the door open, the hinges squeaking as it swung wide. Both their heads turned, Matthew confused, my father calm, unreadable. I need a word with my brother, I said firmly, though my voice trembled. My father studied me for a long second, then stood. Don't tire him out, he said, his hand brushing my arm as he passed, another quiet warning. When the door clicked shut behind him, I turned to Matthew. His eyes were half open, struggling to focus on me. Matt, I whispered, leaning closer. Listen to me. Something was in that drink. It wasn't an accident. His brow furrowed, confusion clouding his face. What are you talking about? I swallowed hard, my heart in my throat. Dad did this to you. For a moment, Matthew just stared at me, his expression dazed, as though the words hadn't fully landed. The steady beep of the heart monitor filled the silence between us. Finally, he whispered, You're out of your mind. His voice was weak but firm enough to sting. I shook my head quickly, leaning closer. No, Matt, I saw it. He put something in my drink. You took it instead. He closed his eyes, wincing as though the effort of keeping them open was too much. You've hated me for years, Emily. Don't drag me into your issues with him. I felt my throat tighten. This isn't about hate. This is about you almost dying tonight. His eyes flickered open again, bloodshot and glassy. He looked at me like I was speaking another language. He's our dad. He wouldn't, his words trailed off, but the hesitation told me enough. He didn't believe me, not really, but a crack of doubt had slipped in. I grabbed his hand, squeezing it harder than I meant to. Matt, you felt it. You know it wasn't just alcohol. You said yourself it was different. Why won't you trust me? His chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, his face pale. He turned his head away from me, staring at the bland hospital wall. You need to drop this, Emily. Just let it go. Anger surged hot in my chest. If I let it go, next time it won't be you. It'll be me. Or Mom. His jaw tightened, but he didn't look back at me. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, until I realized he wasn't going to say another word. I sat back, my hands trembling in my lap. If Matthew wouldn't believe me, I couldn't count on him. I would have to find proof on my own. And I knew exactly where to start, back at the house. The drive back to the house felt longer than it should have. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly they ached, but it was the only thing keeping me grounded. The night air was heavy, and the streets were quiet, as if the world had no idea what kind of darkness I was driving back into. When I pulled into the driveway, the house loomed in front of me, its windows dark except for the faint glow of the living room lamp. My father's car was parked neatly in its usual spot. He was still here. I killed the engine and sat there for a minute, my pulse pounding in my ears. This was reckless. Stupid. But if I walked away now, he would win. And Matthew's near death would be buried under excuses and lies. I slipped inside quietly, the front door creaking just slightly as I eased it open. The air smelled faintly of smoke from the grill, mixed with something sharper, my dad's cologne. The house was too still. Moving quickly, I went upstairs to his office. It was the one room we were never supposed to go into as kids. The door was locked, as always, but I'd learned long ago that the lock wasn't complicated. My hands shook as I worked a paperclip I'd grabbed from the kitchen drawer, the sound of the click making my stomach twist. Inside, the office was meticulously organized. Bookshelves lined the walls, binders stacked neatly on the desk, framed certificates reminding anyone who entered of his supposed authority. But my eyes went straight to the drawer in his desk. I yanked it open, rifling through papers, pens, and files until I hit something small, tucked away at the back, a glass vial, half full of a fine white powder. My chest tightened. This was it. Proof. I pulled my phone from my pocket, snapping a quick photo, then another of the vial in my hand. My heart hammered as I slid it back into place, trying to make everything look untouched. And then the floor creaked behind me. Looking for something? My father's voice was calm, almost amused. I froze, the blood draining from my face. Slowly, I turned. He was standing in the doorway, his figure framed by the dim hall light, watching me with that same unreadable expression. This time, though, I knew, he wasn't going to let me walk away so easily. My breath caught in my throat. The vial was back in the drawer, but the photos burned in my phone like a ticking bomb. My father stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a soft click. The sound was louder than any slam. "You shouldn't be in here," he said evenly, his eyes never leaving mine. I swallowed hard, my hands tightening around my phone. "You tried to kill me." My voice was steady, but my knees felt weak. "Matthew almost died because of you." He chuckled softly, shaking his head like I was a foolish child. "Do you hear yourself? Sedatives, poison, conspiracies. Do you think anyone will take that seriously? Your own brother doesn't believe you. Your mother won't either. You've played the role of the overdramatic daughter for too long, Emily. That's who they see. Anger surged through me, hot and unsteady, but it gave me strength. I don't care what they see. I know the truth. And now I have proof. His eyes flicked briefly to my phone. Just for a second, but it was enough. His calm demeanor cracked. He stepped forward, his movements quicker now, more deliberate. Give me the phone. I backed away, the desk pressing into my spine. My thumb hovered over the screen, ready to send the photos somewhere, anywhere. If you touch me, I swear I'll make sure the whole world sees what you've done. For the first time that night, he didn't have a response ready. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing, and I realized he wasn't used to losing control. The silence stretched, the air so tense it felt like it might shatter. Then he leaned closer, his voice low, venomous. You think you've won, Emily? This isn't over. It will never be over. I met his gaze, my hand steady now on the phone. Then you should have made sure I drank that glass. I pushed past him, my heart hammering as I forced myself not to run down the stairs. Outside, the night air hit me like a wave, but I didn't stop. Not until I was in my car, engine roaring, my phone clutched like a lifeline. For the first time in years, I wasn't just afraid of him. I was ready to fight him.